19th City Debates, and City Debates is one of those flagship events where we come together every year. We look at critical questions facing cities, facing societies, and it's an opportunity to bring the best thinkers in the world to think with us about those questions.
Crisis is something that's unfolding, that we're living, that is overlapping, and that doesn't wait for one to be over for the other to start.
The first step in the land value chain, again, and you can't think about value capture without thinking about what's the step or the action that creates that value in the first place and who creates it. If you identify who created it and when and what impact it had, then you move into this concept of value capture, which I'll define in a couple of seconds, and then you can recover that increment that was triggered by the action that generated that value.
So what we're really saying, and this goes back to something that Dr. Silva and Dr. Jeber were talking about yesterday, is that we're seeing very much land value creation and land value capture without any distribution of that land value.
These legalization processes bear the risk of actually promoting informality, as you saw in Greece. It's very tempting for politicians to keep them going and turn them from a mechanism to, let's say, create a more, equal and equitable local situation.
This understanding of land as being beyond the territorial and into kind of water also brings with it question marks about climate change.
I wanted to show from this presentation how through our projects and through the tools, the research and community tools, we can actually challenge the inequality, challenge the growth machine.
The building boom that began in the early 2000s in Beirut corresponds to a period of newly introduced policies and financial tools, coupled with the fact that construction activity was mainly residential and hence economically unproductive. To this end, we begin with the biggest challenge. How do we construct a missing custodian for the recovery process of the urban fabric that was left earlier by booms and busts?
To address this paucity of information, we created City of Tenants, a user-fed geoportal through which current and prospective tenants can learn about prevailing rental conditions.
And you have a very undercapacitated government, huge problems, many of which echoed here now, dollarization, high turnover of bureaucratic staff, withholding of information between different government agencies. Again, it's very hard to have a robust understanding of land values when you don't have, you have huge proportions that aren't on the register, aren't valued for property taxation, and so on.
If you launch a project, the number of sales will increase, and then next year it will decrease. So at a local level, it's very difficult from my point of view, and I follow this observatory, and it's very difficult to know whether the price and the market will increase around the station. I mean, not just for 1 year, but in the time.
For sustainability-oriented obligations, these are mainly required for projects with possible environmental impact. Environmental protection law holds to the polluter pays principle. It imposes an environmental impact assessment on every project, whether public or private, that might affect the environment due to its size, nature, or activities.
This tool, in fact, has sort of a speculative core. It has a speculative foundation to it, that it depends on expectancy and future thinking, as I've said. There's lots of wills and anticipating, and then requires appreciative increases in property values. So there's a speculative sort of imperative to this tool that in the process reshapes the public sector's ideas of space and time and its identity vis-a-vis capital.
We had a very successful housing policy, neoliberal, with vouchers, and so the housing deficit came down for many years until more or less 2006 it started growing again.
Concentrations of vacancy have been related to a higher rate of crime,
decrease in property values of the properties that are around them. So these are all other externalities of having high concentration of vacancy.
There are two plan notes. First is related land contribution. Second is related infrastructure participation fee.
The two things I want to say is we need to do it as an African continent. We're the fastest urbanizing continent at the moment. We're not going to be able to pay for all this infrastructure if we don't think creatively and figure out how we're going to do it, right? That we don't really have a choice not to think about all options.
One of the key challenges that we have in the Egyptian context, we don't have a land readjustment law. We don't have a process whereby landowners come together and start to discuss how we're gonna subdivide this land, how we're gonna allocate the land.
So this is why we became interested in land value capture as a fundamentally systemic intervention into exclusionary urban land markets. So that shows that as a concept, land value capture should not only be a fiscal tool, but that there are very important redistributive components that can underpin the concept. I'm really very happy to see this close on a note of building together partnerships and moving forward, imagining that we can tame the growth machine. Thank you.